Gnome Paperweight by Share Our World. We are going to make a little gnome paperweight today, and what we're going to need is some fluff or stuffing, some yarn, a stretchy fabric. I'm using performance fabric, but whatever stretchy fabric you have is probably fine. If you have an old t-shirt, that would work too. A piece of fabric for their hat, and a body fabric. You're actually not going to see much of the body fabric, so it isn't critical what you use for your body fabric, but in this particular case, I'm going to use this one. It kind of matches my yarn. And you're going to need a piece of trim optionally and some poly pellets. The first thing we're going to do is cut this out. And my body fabric has already been cut to 7 by 8. And I just have a strip of leftover fabric for my hat. First thing we're going to do is cut the hat pattern piece out of my piece of paper. Just like this. This PDF file can be found in the description. There we are. Now I'm going to fold my hat fabric so it has a fold. And this is going to be placed on the fold. And look at that, my hat fabric isn't quite big enough. I don't mind if my hat fabric is a little bit small. And I'm going to trace that on there. The reason why I trace on instead of cut against this fabric is I don't actually like my fabric shears to cut right along a piece of paper. But it isn't super critical. It just is what I do. Then I'm going to take my fabric shears and cut right along that line, and you notice I've still had it folded over. And because my piece of fabric is just a teensy bit short, I am going to trim it a little bit off so that it is not quite as long right there. So now we have our hat, we have our body, and now we need our beard. For the beard, I am using a book, but you can use really anything that you can wrap around. What I'm going to do, so we're going to move these out of the way. I'm going to wrap 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times around. You can do 8 or as little as 7. That's just how full his beard is, and snip off my piece of yarn. Now I have another piece of yarn that I'm going to lay out just like this. And the reason why I'm going to lay out this is because I'm going to tie off my beard with that piece of yarn. Now I'm going to slide this carefully off the book. And I only use the book for measuring. Then I'm going to set my beard in the center of this long piece of yarn, and I like my center piece of yarn to be long because I'm going to be using it to sew it onto my body. Then I'm going to tie a square knot, right like that, right in the center of my beard. And that is all there is to the beard. Here is my nose. The nose, we are going to use a round circle of some variety. In this particular case, this is the top of a medicine bottle, and I am just going to trace around there just like that. I am not going to cut this out until later. The first thing I'm going to do after I've traced around that is give myself a needle and thread. I'm just going to take the thread off my sewing machine. I'm going to thread my needle. Then I'm going to bring my thread together and tie a knot right here. We're going to tie that into a knot. There we have a nice tidy knot at the bottom of our thread. And then we are going to baste around this circle. And I'm using very large stitches because I don't need this, I don't need it to be, you don't need it to be small stitches. We're just making it so this will be the right shape for a nose. If you want your little guy to have a slightly smaller nose, it certainly is up to you. I measured this. This lid was like 1 3/4 inch in diameter. In fact, all of the lids for my medicines were roughly that same size. So if you don't have a medicine lid, you can use the lid of your milk or any other thing that's roughly this size. Now you see I have got it basted all the way around. I'm going to pull this side out just a little bit. Actually, I'm not quite yet. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to trim this. So we are going to cut it to its circle. We just don't want to cut it to its circle too soon because I find it easier to work with a slightly bigger piece of fabric. There we have our circle all the way trimmed. Be careful not to cut your threads either side. Now we are going to put a little bit of fluff in here. And this takes about the amount of fluff that you can pinch between your finger and thumb. You don't want any more than that because we don't really want to stretch our nose a lot. So we are going to put, with our thumb, we're holding our little bit of fluff on there. And then as you see, as I pull this up, you can see that it's gathering around that piece of fluff. So here I'm gathering it, and I want this to be gathered to the gathers to go to the inside. So as I gather this, I'm just tucking them, and the closer it gets gathered, you'll see the more tucking that happens. And as I tuck this and pull it tight, you'll see that that raw edge is tucked into my little nose. And there's my little nose. I'm just going to take a stitch right here and one more stitch is a tie-off stitch. So I'm going through there and then just tying it off just like that. But I am not going to cut this off. And there is my cute little nose for my guy. So now what we have is our nose ready to be sewn on with its needle and thread attached. My beard ready to be sewn on with its thread attached. I have a piece of trim, I have my body, and I have my hat. So we are now ready to put to sew the parts of our gnome. We'll put everything else out of the way. I am going to need my fluff, so we'll leave that here. We'll put my scissors out of the way so they're not impeding my sewing. Let's start with the hat. So my hat is going to need to be turned up by about 1/4 inch right there. And I'm going to go do that at my ironing board right now. You can see I have ironed this so that I have it a seam. And I am just going to sew right along the edge of my press to put that seam down. There we have it. And now I'm going to put on my trim. And I'm going to put my trim right across that seam I just sewed. The reason why I sew my seam first is just that way I don't have to mess with all of the keeping it turned under while I'm sewing my trim on. And as you can see, I'm just holding my trim on. You can pin it on or clip it on if you'd like. If you would like, you can clip it on just like this. In a couple of places before you sew it. That certainly is acceptable. And I am sewing it down both edges, close to the edge of the trim. You could sew it right down the center of the trim if you wanted to. There's my trim. Now I am going to cut it even with my pattern piece. Now my hat is ready to be sewn. And my hat is going to be right sides together. And I find that it's more important to match this end than it is to match the other end. If your other end doesn't match, it's okay, but if this end doesn't match, you will notice it. So we're going to put a couple of clips on. We're sewing from the top, just because your machine might be a little bit happier not starting on the thick trim. Sometimes taking a running start for that trim makes sense for sewing machines. Now I have my little hat sewn in half, and I am going to turn it right side out and look at it. Oh, I like that. Now my hat is ready to go on my gnome. Oh, but I'm going to push my tip out just a little bit more. If you can't get your tip nice and sharp just by pushing it out with your finger, take your sewing needle that you have attached to your nose and just pull it out just a little bit. Just like that. And that will give you a sharper tip. Just like that. And this is the front of my hat right here. This curve in the back makes it so it stands up, and I'm not going to iron this. We're just going to put this in my finished pile. The next thing we are going to do is the body. Now, the body is relatively simple. We are going to fold our 7 by 8 piece of fabric the hamburger direction. So this still is 7 inches, and this is the 8-inch direction, and this is the 7-inch direction. And I am just going to sew that at the edge of my presser foot. The next thing I'm going to do, if you've done a tutorial with me, if you did the water bottle tutorial with me, we're going to do the bottom of our gnome just like we did the bottom of our water bottle. So I found the center, and I'm just going to put a pin right in the center of that piece, just like that. I have a pin in the marking my center, and I am going to what I call fingernail press this one, the center of the fold. If you look at a fingernail press, you can see that I can still see the fold when I open it up. It's kind of hard to see, but if you do that, you will see in your own work that you can see that. Now I'm going to open this up to the pin, just like that, and I'm going to match that little crease that I made with my fingernail with the pin, and then I'm going to shut this up like a sandwich. So now I have a fold that the center fold goes to the center, and I'm going to give that a clip. Now this side is a little bit easier just because I have the seam. I'm going to open this up. Now I'm going to match the seam with my pin. Then I'm going to close that up again like a sandwich and put a clip there. Take my pin out. Now you will see that I have 4 layers here, 4 layers here, and this edge and this edge are folded to that center edge, that center point, and that center point are folded to the inside of the center. And I am going to sew at my 1/4 inch seam allowance. At the edge of my presser foot, which is my 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm just going to sew right across that bottom. And when I turn this right side out, you will see that I have a nice tidy bottom. And the reason why I just wanted my bottom to be squared off so that he will stand up nicely. And again, I'm not ironing any part of this gnome. Now, I am going to dump my poly pellets into the bottom here. Now, as you can see, it stands up nicely. And then I am going to add fluff. Now, I'm going to add enough fluff to make my beard fit him. You can make him a little bit taller, you can make him a little bit shorter, but I just want him as tall as his beard. And that happens to be as tall as his beard, so I am going to stop right there. And I want my fluff to be squishy. I need a tad bit more than I just put in. I want it to be squishy, not hard. But I don't want it to have a lot of, it needs to be firm. Now, I'm going to take that the end of the yarn, the very end of my yarn. There I have another piece of yarn from my 4 yards of yarn. And I am going to fold my raw edge down. This raw edge is not going to be sewn down, it's just going to be folded down. And I'm folding it into the center of my gnome body. And the reason why I'm folding it down is just because I don't want a raw edge. If we had a raw edge at this particular place, it wouldn't matter that much because it's going to be under the hat. But I like to not have a raw edge. Then I'm going to take this like a gift bag, and I am going to take my piece of yarn and tie it around there, just like this. And I'm going to tie it into a square knot again. So I have made just a little bag of stuffing and poly pellets. And that is the body of my gnome, right there. I'm going to cut these off a little bit shorter because you don't want to see these under the hat. And there is the body of my gnome. Hello, gnome, you look so cute. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a yarn needle. And with my yarn needle, I'm going to sew on the beard. And you notice we left this nice long yarn end because I wanted to be able to tell the yarn ends from the main body. And I'm going to thread my needle. Nope, got yarn fluff in my mouth. And I am going to look at all the sides of this. I don't want to do his beard along the seam, so I'm probably going to do it on this side. And I am going to take my yarn and I am going to take 2 stitches into my body and pull it through. As you can see, that pulled the beard up to where I wanted to be, and I have this other long piece, and I am going to tie 1 more square knot. 1. There's my square knot. And now I have my beard already attached. That was super fast. And I'm going to trim these because I no longer need the ends. The next thing we're going to do actually is put the hat on. Now as we put our hat on, you can see I am hiding that part that I tied, and I'm bringing him all the way down to the beard. There's my hat, all the way down to the beard. Very cute. And the last thing we're going to do is we're going to put our nose on. And we are going to sew our nose on kind of like a button. Now you notice we still have thread attached to our nose. So we're going to sew this on kind of like a button. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go through my hat and my body, just like I'm sewing on a button, and then I'm going to come back and go through the top of my nose. just like that. And I want to catch lots of layers of the nose, and I'm going to do that twice for the top, and then I will do it twice for the bottom. And now I'm going to look at my beard, and you can see that some go one direction, some go the other, and I'm going to separate my beard so that the threads, the yarn strands go each direction. I'm going to take my needle and go behind and through my body. Then I take my needle out on the other side of my thread strands, and I am going to press my nose down good and hard, go through the nose, and then I'm going to come back and just sew it again like a button. If you can see that, I'm going to sew it again just like a button. Oops, caught my beard again. As you can see, it kind of is easy to catch your beard. So I'm holding my beard back just a little bit. And I am going to sew through my nose again, just like a button. Then I'm going to sew through my body again, just like a button. Then I'm going to pull this nice and tight and look to see how we like our nose. Now I'm going to tie it off right here. And to tie it off, I'm just going to take a small stitch into the body, go through my loop, pull it tight, and then I'm going to go into the body to hide the thread. There I have it. I'm snipping off my thread. Our gnome is almost done now. We are going to rearrange his hat back on his head, and we are going to resituate his cute beard. And in the back here, you will see that I have a little tag. That little tag I'm just going to trim off. Being careful not to catch his body. Now I'm going to take a single stitch right here. Again, I'm making a knot at the end of my thread. So we are going to hide that thread a little bit better this time. And I am going to just take one stitch, and I've lined this up. I've lined my back seams up, but you don't have to. It's not a big deal. But I'm going to take a single stitch here. If you think he's getting thrown a lot, like I said, he kind of feels like a beanbag, you might take a couple of stitches. And this is just to hold the hat down. Through there, tying it off. Pushing that through my body fabric. To make his hair so that it is curly, we are going to twist our yarn the opposite direction it's twisted, and then we are going to pull each strand out individually until all of our strands have been untwisted, and he will look like he has a curly-haired beard instead of a little yarn beard. And then you will be done with your sweet little gnome paperweight. Thank you for watching Share Our World.